Alright, today I'm going to show you how I installed my FrontRunner roof rails on my 2016 Jeep Grand Cherokee. For those of you that are familiar with the FrontRunner rails, you might notice that mine have a couple of modifications. I'm not going to cover them in this video, but I will in a future video where I talk more about the rooftop tent. And I guess this would be a good time to remind you to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you're interested, I'll be putting out more videos like this one. So for a while I had the rails installed in the factory holes, but the last time I went to inspect things I noticed some hairline fractures around a couple of the front rivnuts. Not good. My rooftop tent is actually under the 68 kilogram factory weight limit for the roof rack, but it was obviously not holding up, so I needed a solution. I was looking for something that would be easy on the wallet, and came across a couple of posts online where guys have installed rivnuts in the rain gutter portion of the roof. The sheet metal's folded and doubled in this part of the roof, so it's much stronger. This is actually where most cars install roof rails. I was a bit nervous about drilling holes in my roof, but I decided to go for it, and so far I'm very happy with the results. Feels rock solid. The first thing to do is to pull out the rubber molding and clean out the old tape residue. I used a product called Orange Glow that, along with lots of elbow grease, seemed to do the trick. So since I was pretty nervous about drilling into the car, I decided to complete a full install of one of the rivet nuts first before drilling any other holes in the roof, just to make sure I felt comfortable with it. That way, if something went wrong, it would only be one hole that I would have to deal with instead of 12. I also purchased a couple of extra rivet nuts to practice with on a piece of sheet metal. That way I could get a feel for how they worked and the amount of torque that I needed, and just getting comfortable with the tools and the installation overall before I actually went to put it into the roof. Rivet nuts can be a little bit tricky, so if you've never used them before, I highly suggest that you practice on something disposable before you go straight to the install on the vehicle. So there are tools that you can buy to install rivet nuts. They tend to be fairly pricey though. So this is a method that actually works pretty well and really only costs you a couple bolts. I say a couple because, as you'll see in a second, I end up shearing the heads off a couple of them, which is really one of the reasons why it's really important to practice this a little bit before you try it. The key with rivet nuts is that you need to torque them enough that they compress, but if you overdo it, obviously you can strip the threads. So it's better that the bolt strips or shears rather than the rivet nut stripping. If that happens, you have a much harder problem on your hands. The rivet nut that I'm using is the Mopar factory rivet nut. It has that black ring that you see as a sealant to keep out moisture, but I decided to go ahead and use an epoxy as well, just to be extra safe. It'll also help to hold the rivet nut in place, particularly if I decide to remove the rack later. Sometimes rivet nuts can have a tendency to spin out over time, so this will help to mitigate against that. And here's the first oops. There's the shear. Thankfully the bolt was at number 2. The bolt was easy to remove, and I just did another one and repeated the process until it was pinned down tight. If you're wondering what I'm dremeling out there, it's actually a layer of epoxy. We've got to remove a little bit of it to get to the metal. The hole for the first rib nut I did was a little bit on the large side, so all of the following ones I actually ended up drilling a slightly smaller hole and then used the Dremel to kind of shape it, and a file there to kind of shape it more hexagon, like the rib nut itself, which gave it a much more snug fit. Drilling it most of the way through and then hammering slightly helped to give it the shape, so that will also help to prevent any spin out in the future. I also got a little bit more generous with the epoxy, again, just to be on the extra safe side. So in order for the rails not to touch the car, you need a spacer. I bought some nylon off of Amazon and basically cut it to the size of the feet of the rail. For the rubber molding, I bought one new one and then I had the old one. The old one was just a lot of work to remove the old tape, but it's doable. This is what they looked like once they were all cut to size. And then I bought some weather stripping to put on the little blocks. This will help to channel the water around the gaps in the rubber molding.